All right. I want to here to call the meeting to order for the Thurston County District 8 special meeting to discuss and present information on our proposition number 1 that will be on the fall ballot. And I'm Doug Kilpatrick, the chair. Want to welcome you folks that made it here today. If we get some more folks online, that will be terrific as well. Purpose of the meeting is to try and just provide really good information, clear information about the ballot proposition, why it's out there, what we're doing, and the decisions that voters get to make on things. And so I'm going to turn it over to the fire chief, Brian Van Camp, who's going to make our presentation.
Thank you. Yes, like Chairman said, this opportunity to share information about the ballot measure, why we're doing it, what the impacts will be if it passes or if it doesn't pass. So before we get started, we have put together a video, an informative video, talks about the whole thing, some of which we'll talk about here. But I'd like to go ahead and play that first, and then after that's over, then briefly go over each of the items and then answer any questions that you might have. So if you can go ahead and cue up the video.
Hello, I'm Brian Van Camp. I'm Fire Chief at South Bay Fire District 8.
I'm Brandon LeMay, and I'm the Chief of Operations here at the South Bay Fire Department.
I'm Leslie Demich, and I live out on Johnson Point. I've been out there for about 30 years.
2023 is the 70th anniversary for Fire District 8. In 1953, a series of neighbors that got together, formed the districts, collectively built fire stations and borrowed fire apparatus and responded to calls over the years. The helping neighbor concept was the basis of the formation of both Fire District 7 and 8 and has continued through the years to the current practices that we have at the Fire District. Fire District 7 and Fire District 8 merged in 2014. Our fire district has 4 guiding principles. One is the fact that we provide career and volunteer staffing to meet our service commitments. Our organization is accountable and transparent in what it does. The community in the district drives the service levels that we have. All financial decisions ultimately are at the public level, the voter level, the taxpayer level. We are primarily funded through property tax. This is established by an assessment by the county. The limit in the state of Washington for fire district is $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed value of your home and property. In 2023, the district received $1.20 of that $1.50.
Our goal is to educate our community on the challenges that we're facing and the goals we're trying to achieve to better support the community.
We work very hard to achieve high levels of service. We measure that service that we provide through what we call target levels of service.
We've had the opportunity to avail ourselves of their services twice. Well, the first time they saved our house, the second time they saved my husband's life.
The target level of service for fire is having at least 4 of our firefighters respond to a fire scene within 10 minutes. The target level of service for emergency medical services, providing 2 or more EMTs to the scene within 8 minutes of receiving the call.
The fire department got there just as quickly as you can imagine.
Some of the challenges that we're having in providing service that meet the target levels of service are the increasing call volume.
There's been more houses, more development, there's more traffic, there's certainly a lot more people out there. And it's not the quiet place that we first moved to 30 years ago.
From a beginning of an annual call volume of approximately 24 or less, we are responding to nearly 1,300 calls a year for fire, for EMS calls, and for other public service calls.
My husband was cutting a tree down. A portion of the tree that he was cutting fell and broke his neck.
About 3/4 of all of our call volumes EMS. We need to have individuals that are qualified as EMTs. We need to make sure that people are qualified as firefighters. We need people who are qualified as driver operators on the apparatus. If they aren't qualified to drive the engine, the wheels don't turn and the water doesn't flow. We need somebody to be in charge. And we have to have all the right people with the right qualifications, and we need enough of them in order to staff these apparatus.
When they first arrived, I was kind of surprised that they brought the fire truck, but when they did, they had the jaws of life right there for us. And they were able to get him to the hospital quickly and not only saved his life, but saved his mobility. And that wasn't going to be possible if it hadn't been for the care that they took and the knowledge they had about how to handle the broken neck and how to handle a situation like that, not just for the EMTs, but for the fire crew that was there to free him.
We're trying to staff 2 stations 24/7. And right now we don't have enough staffing in order to make that happen. One of the biggest challenges we've had is a decline in volunteerism. Most of the volunteers that come through are looking to get hired in a career position, and that's great, we're proud of them. But with the decline of our volunteerism, we're finding more and more need for career staff. Our full-time career staff are required to be fire qualified, EMT qualified driver operators.
As part of our strategic planning process, we have developed budget-based plans that estimate the service levels that will be delivered to the community. Plan A is the primary strategic direction we've adopted and are proposing. It would stabilize our volunteer staffing and over time increase the staffing level from 18 career staff that we have today to 28. It would reduce the average response time that we have from approximately 7.5 minutes to about 6 minutes throughout the district. It would also provide for full funding of our capital asset plan, which covers the self-funded replacement of apparatus and equipment and facilities operations maintenance costs.
With Plan A, we're trying to increase our staffing. We'd love to be able to staff 2 stations 24/7, meet our target levels of service by getting 4 firefighters on scene within 10 minutes to fight a fire, and we're able to get 2 EMTs on scene within 8 minutes for an EMS call.
While we already knew that 3 firefighters were more effective than 2 firefighters on an engine, we wanted to run some experiments to learn more and gain a better idea as to the extent of the value of the 3rd firefighter.
Capital, Battalion 8's on scene with single-story medium house, the working fire.
It's important to note that by law and for safety reasons, in most cases, 2 firefighters can only make entry into a burning building when there are at least 2 firefighters on the outside in the event of an unforeseen emergency or the interior firefighters need rescued. We ran the same basic drill with all conditions being identical, except that the drill on the top has 2 firefighters on the engine, while the drill on the bottom has 3 firefighters on the engine. In both scenarios, there were 4 primary goals and benchmarks to measure that we wanted to confirm and timestamp as they occurred. Benchmark 1 is to get 1 hand line deployed out and flow water. Benchmark 2 is to have 2 firefighters on the outside so that 2 firefighters could enter the building. Benchmark 3 is to locate the fire and begin the firefight. Benchmark 4 is for firefighters to complete a search of the entire structure and check for occupants. The drill timer begins with the arrival of the first on-scene engine. With both scenarios, the battalion chief in the SUV is the incident commander and arrives on scene at the same time as the first engine. The battalion chief is counted as one of the 2 out firefighters. Both drills are shown at the same runtime.
Driver operators now getting the pump established, getting the pump set.
In order to make entry with a crew of 2, several things need to happen. Handline needs to be deployed, water needs to be shown, tools needs to be staged, and the door needs to be forced open. In the top scenario, we can see that the company officer is still working on getting the handline deployed. In the bottom scenario, we can see that the firefighter and the company officer are working at the same time. The company officer is forcing open the door while the firefighter's getting the handline ready for attack.
Handline out with water displayed now.
The top team has met benchmark 1. The bottom team has met benchmark 1, flow water.
Up front.
Capital, South Bay Command. We have 2 and 2 out. We'll make an interior attack.
The bottom team has hit benchmark 2, make entry. The bottom team has met benchmark 3 and is fighting the fire.
Command copies. Good knock on the fire. Continuing primary search.
The bottom team has met benchmark 4, search the building.
The top scenario, the company officer is actually applying water from the outside to do the best he can to help combat the fire while he's unable to make entry into the building. Comparatively, we can see the bottom scenario, they've already met all 4 benchmarks.
Engine 83 from command. You guys are going to be on deck, side alpha. 83 Steve, on deck, side alpha.
Now this time Engine 83 has arrived on scene, and they're able to do support functions for the crew.
In the top scenario, we've met benchmark 2, which is to get 2 firefighters inside because we have our 2 firefighters out.
Command, copy. Good knock on the fire. You're going to continue.
The top team has met Benchmark 3 and is fighting the fire.
On the bottom scenario, the second team is actually able to make entry for additional assignments, such as checking for fire extension, shutting off utilities, or making a secondary search in case there's any more occupants that were missed.
The top team has met Benchmark 4, search the building.
The bottom scenario is consistent with our Plan A we're trying to achieve for our community.
In order to implement Plan A, we would need sufficient funding that would be provided through 2 ballot measures. The first ballot measure is this fall to restore our levy rate from $1.20, which it currently is, to $1.50, which is the statutory limit. It also will require voter approval of an excess levy in the fall of 2024 for collection in 2025. If voters approve both the levy restoration in 2023 and the excess levy in 2024, the levy rate would raise to $1.95. Subsequent years, the levy rate would go down slightly, with 2026 at about $1.90, and in 2027 would be estimated at about $1.85. During our planning process, we also considered 3 other plans that would be based on reduced levels of revenue that we have in providing commensurate service. The information on each of Plan A, B, C, and D can be seen on our website. It shows detailed levels of what our estimated staffing, what the impacts to our service levels, and what the cost to the taxpayer will be.
In August, there will be an opportunity for our citizens to vote. We just want to make sure everybody's educated, and we've communicated with everybody on the challenges and the goals we're trying to achieve. In the end, it's up to the community to decide what level of service they'd like to see out of their fire department.
To learn more about the South Bay Fire Department, including resources, services, volunteer opportunities, and for detailed information on proposed plans, visit southbayfire.com.
And as I mentioned, we have this posted on our website, should anybody want to see it. I think it's in Facebook and some other locations as well. So in fact, a great majority of the information that's shared in the video was actually covered in our previous meeting that we had in March 30th. So I'm not going to repeat a lot of that, but other than talking about the guiding principles, which is something that's helping to drive the direction that we want to do, what we're trying to do is in the meeting today is explain some of the challenges that the department is facing that is causing us to ask for the ballot measure. The second thing is talking about some of the things that we've done leading up to the point of this ballot measure, and then describe the proposed ballot measure. And actually there's 2. There's one that will be this fall, and then in order to accomplish Plan A, there will be a second ballot measure in the fall of 2024 as well. And then talk a little bit about the impacts, and then of course answer any questions that anyone might have. So one of the things that I just want to emphasize, and it was mentioned briefly, is that this is the 70th anniversary of the fire district. As you know, it started off with 2 different fire districts. We merged in 2014, and the first full year of operating as one department was in 2015. So as a result of that work, we began looking at what our current strategic plan was and modifying it to accommodate the merged district. So we had some significant planning effort that we did. And we've always had a district mission and vision. And here we go. Our mission statement is really what guides what we do. And frankly, we do. We use it as a touchstone that also takes us with our vision on trying to meet our service levels. And the basic deployment model we have is we believe that being deployed from 2 strategically located fire stations with round-the-clock staffing and having well-trained and equipped responders, and then providing those responders with the appropriate equipment and vehicles and so forth that they need to do that job. So really, that's our vision, to get to the service level that's in our mission statement. So what we do on an annual basis, we take a look at our master planning and do annual goals and objectives. And one of the objectives for 2023 was to agree upon and establish a baseline strategy for deployment, which we've done. As it was mentioned in the video, we call it Plan A. And we've looked at other optional ones, and as was mentioned, 4 different operating schemes or deployment models, if you will, based on varying degrees of revenue that we would receive. So when I mentioned in the video that it was budget-based scenarios, it's exactly what they are. So we start with the amount of revenue that we would expect to get in all of the 3 different or 4 different scenarios, and how much service level can we get out of that. That would be how many people, what amount of money can we spend on maintaining and replacing equipment, and all of the other day-to-day expenses that the fire department would have. So as it was mentioned, the big components of these are staffing, and then all the assets that are necessary to do that. Our target levels of service, as was mentioned, we have 2 basic, fairly simple ones that we've been using for many years, one for fire and one for EMS. The one from fire taking a little bit longer because there's more entailed in turning out a crew in a fire scene than an EMS scene. But that's what we measure our service level, and we report on it every month. We track it from year to year, and we've seen that we've had some variations in that. And again, the whole idea here is to use these as a benchmark for our deployment model, which is, again, going back to 2 stations and so forth. One of the things that's been very important for us also is making sure that we understand what the rules are, both from the government for safety rules and those sorts of things that guide how we prepare our responders through training, how we protect them through health and safety program, and how we supervise them and everything. Plus the fact of the equipment, which is a big safety issue, our facilities, another big safety issue, and making sure we have a balance for all of those things and what budget we propose. And each of the 4 budgets that we have proposed not only focuses on labor, but all of the things necessary, like equipment and overhead and so forth, that's necessary to accomplish that. One thing that has resulted from this plan up to this point, anyway, has been we have received favorable increases in our insurance rating that's provided by the Washington Survey and Rating Bureau. And because of the increased training that we have, the more standardized and consistent staffing, the improvements in our facilities and equipment and so forth, we are currently blessed with a ISO or public protection classification rating 3, which is pretty darn good for a relatively small combination fire department. And of course, we want to continue to maintain that. Obviously, generally that should help benefit the insurance premiums that you all pay on your fire insurance for your home and property and so forth. Some of the challenges that we have, as you might guess, is that we have increases in our service workload. If you go to slide 8, there we go. You can see these are color coded. The The blue is our EMS, which, as you can see, is by far our largest percentage of the call volume we have. We still do respond to fires. It's not as big a percentage, but they're still there. And then the red are all the other non-EMS, non-fire calls, like service calls, like power lines and non-medical assistance and things like that. So, but you can see that we've been growing on a 5 to 6% average growth rate per year, and it's creeping up there. It's interesting to note in 1953, in the first year that both District 7 and District 8 were incorporated and operated. District 8 had like 5 calls that whole year, and District 7 I think had 3. I mean, it was just and it's gone from there. Also in our workload, you can see the impact that we've had on our accomplishing our target levels of service. And the red chart shows the percentage of achieving target levels of service for our fire calls over the by year there. And you can see that generally it's trending up. It's a result of having better staffing, better equipment and that. And obviously another factor to that is it's a much smaller number of calls too. So it's a smaller database, but it shows a fairly positive trend. But the EMS, which is the vast majority of calls that we have, shows a lesser percentage of achievement of our target level service for EMS. And there's a number of reasons for that. Again, being time sensitive that it is, it's getting those 2 EMTs on the scene within the 8 minutes. And if we're not able to staff the North Olympia Fire Station, or if the call is out on Johnson Point, we don't have staffing out there, the time element is increased and it reduces our achievement of our target levels of service. And you can see there, with the increased volume that we're getting with EMS calls, it's really impacting our ability to continue to meet and improve on our target levels of service for EMS. So again, Plan A was developed to help address that as well. The community risk and the demographics of our community, like Ms. Demich mentioned, is changed a lot. Our population has increased. The types of calls that we have now have increased. You can see that the growing impact of medical calls that we have, and even the types of medical calls now that we're seeing is changing. We're seeing a lot of calls that are for older citizens that are falling and stumbling like that. We're seeing a lot more calls that involve some behavioral issues or other issues like that that are more complicated to deal with in the field than somebody falling and breaking their leg or even a car accident. So those things are increasing in the demand that we have for providing service. One of the big things that we talked about in the video now was what our staffing. And we're having, as was mentioned, difficulty like probably everyone else in the world, including the PTAs, the churches, the service clubs and all that. We're seeing a significant decrease in involvement with the volunteer help. And while we continue to bring volunteers in and are working very hard to maintain a base of volunteers from 25 to 35 at this point, you can see in the green line that the numbers are decreasing over time. In order to maintain service level, obviously it means we need to add additional career staff where we can have more consistency in staffing and have better plan for how we deploy our people. So that's one of the big impacts with the Plan A is really a shift from strong dependence on volunteers, or almost entire dependence upon volunteers at one time, to an increased dependence upon career staff. And then with an increased dependence on career staff, we see that there's a cost impact of that. If you go to the next slide. There we go. So The bottom slide, or the green line, shows our percentage of our total budget for volunteer staff for our operating budget. The upper one, the blue one, shows what the impact or the percentage of cost of our operating budget is for career labor staff. Currently, we have 18 career responders that do that, and I think our average right now for volunteers is about 40 to 45. And it isn't increasing as much. In fact, it's decreasing slightly because obviously the labor cost for volunteers is significantly lower than it is for a career staff member. One of the things I did want to talk about was some of the opportunities that we have exercised in this master planning work that we have been doing all along since going back to 1995 is when the district first wrote a district master plan, and we've continually updated it since then. But one of the opportunities is if we've really taken strategic analysis and planning seriously. We do monitor our performance, as could be seen on our achievement of target levels of service. We do serious budget planning. In fact, as part of Plan A, we looked 5-6 years down the road what the bow wave impact would be for estimated costs for what we want to do, and then what sort of revenue stream we would need to sustain and pay for those costs, and what the impact of that would be. And so we've done that based on proactive staffing planning. Again, the notion that we need to change and increase our career staffing from 18 to 28 was based on the fulfillment of consistent staffing at 2 fire stations, both here and North Olympia. It also, as was mentioned in the video, it also will help us cover expenses that we have for replacement of equipment and vehicles and facilities maintenance and operations costs, which we pay for and budget for over the years. We have not gone back for a voted bond for several years because we set up a basic savings account, if you will, to pay for the replacement of equipment, vehicles, and major facilities appliances and that over the years. So again, Plan A considers that what's needed to replace a pumper 10 years down the line, and self-contained breathing apparatus and computers and shoes, everything that is necessary to help support our responders. And the other thing that we've tried to do is make sure that we can leverage assistance from our neighbors in that. And we work very closely with Thurston County Medic 1, providing EMS. We're very involved in their governance. We're very involved in their training programs. And we've been able to leverage a lot of help and assistance from Medic 1 by doing that and helping our EMS program. We work very closely with our neighbors, Lacey Fire District 3 and Olympia, on standardizing training work and attempting to standardize on things that make sense and help in operating, as well as savings. Like, for example, we cooperate in the maintenance of our apparatus, and we have been purchasing equipment that's consistent with what our neighbors have been doing. And it's frankly has saved us a lot of money over the years in having a standardized approach to maintenance of our apparatus. Also, we've worked with other agencies. We've worked with Thurston County Emergency Management. We have worked with the DNR. We have worked with the Thurston Regional Planning Council, Thurston County Fire Chiefs Association, and mainly with that, there's been a lot of training that's been done for our volunteers, and then the Thurston County Fire Commissioners Association as well. So working with our community partners and also working with our community outreach. We've been fortunate this year to establish a new program we call the Community Outreach Team. And our District Secretary, Heidi Stump, has been the overall manager of that program, but working with some of the firefighters that were sitting in the back, had to go on call, especially Drew, who is our coordinator for the Community Outreach Team. in helping provide information to the public for preventative education on how to prevent fires, how to prevent medical problems like slips and falls. We've gone out and assisted with the schools and doing community events there and everything. So that's something that we're really working on. And we're also using them to help provide information about the ballot measure and answer people's questions. And many times you might see, if you use social media, bulletins and messages from them talking about these sorts of things. And we've been, and they've been well received from the public, and we're hoping to continue to build on that community outreach program. The proposed ballot measures that we've been talking about, and I think go to slide 12. Talks about two different ballot measures, and one is, go back one more. Okay, one is the levy restoration that we talked about, and the second would be a excess levy, which would be in 2024, fall of 2024. And be basically a 4-year term on that.
Hi.
So if both of those pass, an estimate of cost of what it would be the cost to the taxpayer at the home, based on an average assessment at $590,000 is the average assessed value of property in the district. Currently, that taxpayer would pay about $708 with a levy rate of $1.20. If the ballot measure passes this fall and we restore the levy rate to $1.50, it's estimated they would pay about $885 a year. And then if the ballot measure in 2024 or 25 is passed, the excess levy, that rate would go up to $1.51. And then for the subsequent 2 years, that rate would actually lower a bit because of the impact of inflation and increased overall evaluation for all the properties in our district. So again, these are just rough estimates of what the total cost to a voter would be by year passing those. So like I mentioned, we currently have, if you change the slide, currently have 32 volunteers, and we have 18 career responders. And as I mentioned, our 2 core fire stations to respond from are this one and the one at North Olympia. And as of last month, we've been doing that about 88% of the time. The other 12% is when we just don't have enough staff to staff both stations. And what we'll do is we'll put all of our staff at this station because it's strategically located right here, and it can cover both the east side and the west side from one location. Our average response time is just a little over 7 minutes, and that's throughout the whole district for all calls. We are currently, as I mentioned, we are currently funding on an annual basis our capital replacement and expenditures as part of our annual budget process. And then, as mentioned before, the current levy rate is $1.20. So Plan A, which is the one that we are proposing that we follow to consistently staff 2 fire stations, would basically set a base of the numbers of volunteers that we really need to focus on. And we continue to need volunteers. They're an important, imperative part of our overall staffing plan. But again, as I mentioned, it's simply harder and harder to continue to get and retain qualified volunteers. So the estimate would be to try to maintain a balance of about 25 volunteers. And we would, over a 3-year period, increase from a current 18 to 28 career staff if both ballot measures pass. what that would do would allow us almost total staffing at 2 fire stations, and I won't put 100% because things things happen, and you know, it just I can't guarantee a total staff, but it would be pretty darn close that we would consistently staff with adequate staffing at both locations. And by doing that, we can significantly reduce our response time from about 7 minutes to about 6 minutes, as we've shown there, simply because of the deployment and readiness of the model. One thing I want to add is the fact that one of the impacts we're seeing now are the number of times we have 2 calls happening at the same time. And if we've only got 1 crew on, there's a significant delay. We either have to clear from that original scene and then hopefully respond to the second one, or we have to ask one of our neighbors to help provide that service. So one thing that will help affect the average response time is having second string, if you will, in case we do get that second call, and it's happening at a greater frequency. We would continue to be able to fully fund our asset replacement plan, and it showed the estimated property tax levy rate for each of those for each of the 4 years is shown there. So restoring it in this year would bring up the levy rate to $1.50. And then in 24, if voters approve the excess levy, the levy rate in 2025 would be about $1.95. And then again, it would decrease slightly over years as our overall property value in the district increases. We did work on, yes, ma'am.
One quick question, is this the public meeting?
Yes.
Where's the public? I mean, where, are you the public?
The public now. We've
You made
advertised.
a mistake in your advertisement, you said Thursday, and I think most people think it's tomorrow. You said Thursday, the 21st, so right there, that is misleading, and you're probably gonna get more people tomorrow than this one gentleman. How does that happen with a district like this?
Well, it was an error.
And will there be a time when I can make a statement about what you're proposing?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're here. It's open public meetings.
Will you let me know? I don't want to interrupt you.
Well, towards the end here, we're going to have an opportunity to answer,
Oh,
ask questions. Yes.
I will do it for this gentleman. Because he's the public.
Yeah, we did send out as much notice as we could. We did make an error on the day, but the date was correct. It said the 21st. And we've attempted in various means to remind everybody about that correction. So again, we apologize for making that mistake, but we're recording what we're doing today. There's a lot of information available on our website that people can dial into at any time. So if we have folks that missed it tonight, and I've had phone calls from some that couldn't make it, I've told them that recording this, like every public meeting, will be available on our website to watch. So going back to the 4 different plans that we had talked about, the second plan that we had was what we're calling Plan B, and it would provide a lower level of revenue. We would still have the restoring the levy rate, and we would continue to have an excess levy, but at a much lower rate to help us provide a cost to have a lesser level of staffing. Again, we retain and attempt a target of 25 volunteers, but the total number of career staff that we would hire would be 21 that we would achieve over a time period, 2 to 3 year time period. Our ability to staff the 2 fire stations would obviously, with pure staff, would be lessened. It would go down to estimated about 90%. But as noted in red there, that over time that would decrease as well as call volume increases and other things. It would deteriorate from 90% over time. So that's just one thing to be aware our estimated average response times would be about the same what they are, but without any significant change in staffing or deployment, they too would degrade over time, and those average response times would increase after 2026. We would continue to attempt to fully fund our capital asset plan, but again, depending on what happened to revenues over time, the ability to fully fund that would probably diminish as well. And as you can see, the different levy rates that would be estimated for 24, 25, 26, 27 over the next 4-year period. Then Plan C is using the same logic and everything. This would entail a passage of the levy restoration this fall, but there would be no excess levy. So obviously, you're going to see that the levy rates are significantly less, but obviously so is the service level. And it would at best probably be 3/4 of the time that we could staff 2 fire stations. And then obviously the estimated response times would increase significantly as well. And then Plan D would be implemented if there were no increases in our revenue. There would be no levy lid lift, or there wouldn't be a passage, voter approval of a levy lid lift, or voter approval of an excess levy. And while the levy rates would continue to go down with inflation, so would the level of service. So it's estimated that probably after 2025, we simply wouldn't have the resources available to staff both fire stations. And essentially, after that point in time, probably revert to essentially a 1 fire station fire district. So those are the 4 scenarios that we looked at, and we looked at them with a balanced budget. We looked at them with having balance of appropriate volunteer and career labor, a balanced budget of expenditures for overhead, like operations and maintenance for our facilities and equipment, and then some limited replacement, self-funded replacement of equipment beyond that point. So one of the things we just would like to add is the fact that we've had a long history of community involvement and support. And what we try to do is be very as responsive as we can. We understand we're a service industry, and that essentially the customer, citizen, taxpayer, voters will drive what service level that they want to pay for. And that's why we developed 4 different budget scenarios. Again, we're hoping that we can achieve Plan A. It will all depend upon the revenues that we receive and, make adjustments. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you all might have at this point.
Can you put Plan A back up there
Sure.
as a visual? Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead now.
Did you have a question, Camille?
Oh, yeah, I actually have a statement. My name is Camille Pedersen, and I have a long history of dealing with this fire department. Starting in 2011, when they wanted to build a station on 78, even though in the minutes it says they couldn't staff it. So we became a citizen group, and we attended meetings for 7 years. And over the time, we have observed meetings like this, where the chief stands up here, he has a wonderful presentation skills and makes it seem like what he's saying makes sense. But when we looked at the figures and the dollars, no. Anyway, we did win that battle. There's now a house in that station, happily, because if we had lost, there would be an empty fire station. So my first thing is, I don't have a lot of faith in the way this district uses their funds, that uses the funds that we do. My second statement is we love the firefighters. They are the most incredible group of people, and they were with us when we bought the station back in 2011. They didn't get the meeting. So fast forward to today. For some reason, I did not get this notice. There's a history of them not sending notices to me. Once in a while, Heidi will send me a fire district newsletter, but I didn't get this. So I didn't know about it until a couple of hours ago. My neighbor, Cora, put it in my newspaper. And I was amazed. And I have to say, angry all over again. Just like when we found out about that station, which we had no information about, even though it was across the street from us. So I'm a figures, I'm a dollars person. And there's a pattern when the district talks about funding, they talk about tax rates. So it really looks like the situation for them has gone downhill, because after all, we were paying $1.50 per thousand, and now it's going down to $1.20. They don't talk about dollars. We, the taxpayers, care about the dollars. And so as our assessed value goes up, the dollars are going up. The reason why the assessed rate is going down is because there's a lid to protect us. So the lid is, we pay $1.50, then if our tax assessed value goes up, which we know it is climbing like crazy, then if we pay, and I just picked $500,000. If you had a $500,000 house a year or two ago, and you were at the rate of $1.50, you would pay $750 for the fire station district. Now, if your rate went up to $800,000 in years, if you paid that same $1.50, your taxes, just not your taxes, but your fire district tax would have gone up to $1,200 from $750. So this levy lid is to protect you from making such an increase. So to protect you, it says, oh, if we can't get that much money, we're going to lower the rate per thousand. So the rate per thousand goes down to $1.20 per thousand. But still, at $1.20 per thousand, this reduced tax rate, you're still paying $960, which is $210 more than it was before. So when it goes down, the reason is because your assessed value has gone up and you're being protected from an enormous, egregious increase, but you're paying more money. So if it wasn't there, that lid, you'd pay $1,200, but even with the reduced rate, you're paying $210 more. Now, if the second part goes in, the $1.95, and look at it, you're $1.20 to $1.95, that's a 62.5% increase. Does that make you feel good about what you're going to be paying? Doesn't make me feel good. And so if it goes up to the $1.95 per thousand and it stays at $100, let's just put it, keep it there. You'd be paying, when that rate goes in place, $1,560 for what you were paying $750 before. They're not talking about dollars. It's a dog and pony show. The chief is very good at it, but he doesn't give you what you're paying. We don't care about rates. We care about dollars, right? And do we want to pay double, more than double, in a few years? It doesn't make any sense. So I just want.
We did, in fact, we did address the dollar.
But you addressed dollars. Very good. Thank you for mentioning that. But what you did is you kept the assessed value at $590,000. And you kept saying what it would be with the different rates. But remember, that assessed value is a moving figure, right, Chief? So if that goes up to 700, 800,000, so even with your figures where you're keeping the assessed value at the same amount, which is totally unrealistic, it's still increasing by so much.
Well, those figures reflect a cap of 6%. We cannot increase our total assessment. So if your house increases, for example, 30% your value, we can't capture that. We'll only have 6% of that. That's what this reflects. We're capped by the levy rate, we're capped by the total levy, and we're capped by the 6% total increase that we can. So you're not taking that into consideration, the cap and the increased values. Also, if your property increases in value, so does the rest of the district. So it's not necessarily a proportional increase. So if the value of your property increases 30%, your tax levy won't increase 30%. In fact, it can only increase up to 6%, if that.
I understand it. I understand it well, but even looking, let's just even look at your figures, which are the best case scenario for your position. It's going up $400. It's going up more than 50% in 4 years. And so the increase in dollars, Chief, I know, not rates, rates are just like a government thing that they put in to protect people, but it's going up $400. And I'm not telling anybody what to vote for. I just want people to look at the dollars that is being spent and whether you can personally afford that.
That's a choice the voters gonna have to make.
Yeah, I have no doubt you need more money. Over 7 years, my group and I attended about 250 meetings of this district. The weekly meetings, the monthly meetings, the special meetings, Doug, right, we were there. And we followed, there's a lot of places where this district spends money needlessly, okay? And the whole idea about that new fire station, it's $2.5 million, would have been wasted. The people here. They built a training center for over $1 million to be close to here, where they could have gotten the training, the 15-minute drive. And the training is about fire, and most of their calls are about emergency medical. I don't want to down the station, this district. I want to say they don't make good financial decisions. Now, with the 7 years that we attended the meeting, every time they had a decision, they had to hire a consultant instead of making it themselves. So I have very little faith in the way they use their money, but I understand they need more money. They absolutely need more career firefighters. I'm a customer of yours, so I get that. But what is a reasonable amount? What is a reasonable amount? So when you do the dollars and stuff, that we look at dollars, and when we present the argument, that we look not at the rates, but is more than 50% increase in 4 years? Is that reasonable? I mean, 50% over that is going to be double, and we have no, there's a levy lift. I know that, but in the meantime, as that assessed value goes up, you're still paying some.
Well, I would tell you that over the first 2 years, if both ballot measures were passed, yes, it's a significant increase. We understand that. That's why we're trying to explain all that. We are talking dollars. Levy rates are important to calculate what your individual value would be, but we're not trying to hide. We're trying to be as transparent as we can about these dollars. I would also tell you that over the ensuing years, like 26 and 27 and 28, it gradually decreases because we received that initial revenue that we needed, and the overall levy rate will actually go down, and increases would go down for the individual voter. We understand that. So yes, it is a significant increase of labor. Part of what we're trying to do is explain why we're asking for approval and support for what we're calling Plan A, to consistently staff 2 fire stations. And frankly, we've also explained 3 other options that obviously cost less, but you can't expect to get excellent service if you're paying for moderate level of revenue cost. So we've been very clear in saying that there are 4 choices out there, and depending on the community support, the willingness to what property tax you're willing to pay, that's the level of service you're going to get. So we've tried to explain it, that we understand there's money, our expenses have increased significantly. And again, this is an attempt to try to address that, Mike.
Right. I didn't want to interrupt, but I got a short timeline. So
Sure.
Anyway, my name is Mike Brennan. I live at 5103 Slater County Road Northeast. A couple years back, I had 2 stents put in my heart. I had medics there and Dodge, I believe it was Captain Dodge and his crew, come over and help me out and get me to the hospital. So I hear what you're saying. I just retired from DNR after 30 years. I'm still working with them, doing wildfires and stuff. But man, I thought retirement was going to be great, and it is. But every time I turn around, I'm paying more money. So now I got to talk to the county. I did an addition to my house, started about 5-6 years ago, so they got it assessed at a certain amount. And they want to talk to me about it, and it's pretty high. I mean, yeah, if I want to sell it, yeah, I want my property to be high in value, you know, and stuff. So anyway, I got that to deal with, and I didn't get to vote on that. You know, I have to go talk with them now. So anyway, I wish we were up at, 30 career firefighters, and I'll pay the $1.90. I'll look at other ways of how I have to save and maybe not go to dinner to get the fire department to be that. And I know it takes training, and I was here for 25 years as a volunteer, and I finally retired. And man, we started out with a 1965 engine over here that barely started if you did the wrong thing. So anyway, they've come a long way. I hear your issues and stuff, and I'm wishing the public would be in here to help figure out how we can do this stuff, or the chief can do this and their staff, and stuff. I know Heidi has a pretty good volunteer office staff. We used to have nobody, I think, and I don't know what it is at this level, but come around the trainings. We just showed up. Here's your bunker gear, take a weekend training for 2 days out at Tenino and fight fire on Monday. So it's come a long way. I'm having a hard time having to pay a lot of money, but I can adjust other ways, maybe I have to sell the house and live someplace else or whatever, but that's my option. And I will pay the higher, and I would like to see more career firefighters than what you got there. I think that's a good basis to start. I see another issue is how do you retain these firefighters now? These kids that want to go off and do it. I seen it when I left here. There was guys going to Seattle.
It is a revolving door, Mike, and you know it as well as I do, that it's getting harder to not only recruit them, but retain them along. It used to be, the 25-year veteran is extinct. I mean, if we can get 4 or 5 years out of one, we're doing far beyond what the industry standard is.
Yeah.
But it's a revolving door of training volunteers. And because of the effort that's necessary, the cost that's necessary and everything to do that constantly is why we're looking at trying to reduce to a slightly smaller mass of or numbers of volunteers. But we have to have volunteers. I mean, there's just no way we can operate without them.
So with that levy lid and all that, when would we see the 25 career firefighters? I mean, the additional.
Currently we're at 18. The proposal in Plan A is to 28. That would be over a 2 to 3 year period.
Okay, so we have,
and it will ramp up as we have revenue to do that.
Right. And so do we have firefighters here that are at this station that could step into those positions or apply for those positions?
We had, several of our volunteers have, Drew. We've had several of our volunteers that applied for and gotten into our career positions here, and it's great. It's been a very big motivator for them as well. So we have, I think, a very friendly camaraderie with our volunteers and our career staff. I think that there's been a real synergy with that. But as I mentioned earlier, we're having to rely more and more on the numbers of career staff to continue to fill the seats that we have to staff both stations, this one as well as the North Olympia station.
Okay. So I'll leave you with this because I gotta get going here. South County districts, fire districts, had their levy voted no. Talking to some of the firefighters down there and the commissioners and different things, and I hated seeing that, but the public, I don't know if they got really involved in it. But anyway, they shut down some of their stations. They went ahead and put a big sign that said out of order. And I'm thinking, well, really? Did they lose 10 people because of that money? So they had to shut that station? Well, isn't the volunteers running there to go get an aid unit to go to Scott Lake? Or, I just didn't figure that one out there and stuff. And if they were operating with the money they had before that station open and the volunteers responding there, maybe we didn't have career guys there or something, but volunteers going to the station. So where did that equipment go? So got a couple of people I'm gonna ask that question to. So I'd hate to see that happen in our district unless the station was really run down and we needed to build a new one or tear it down or something like that. That's a different story, but.
Well, because we've had balanced budgets over the years, and you know this as well as I do, that we've been able to put money away so that the facilities we're sitting in are well maintained, our equipment is well maintained. We've extended the life of our apparatus. We've generally extended the life of our equipment because it is well maintained, but when we need to replace it, we can, and we pay for it out of our savings account, if you will. In fact, we just bought a new pumper that will be delivered in 2 years to the supply chain, but we wrote a check for that. That's close to $1 million, but we had it in the bank and we saved probably 20% by doing that rather than financing it or going out for bond and asking the taxpayer to pay directly. So it's all of that. It's balancing our labor costs with volunteer and career staff. It's all of these things. It's not just one thing.
And you know me, Chief, I always put my 2 cents with Doug too, as a captain. I've always been the 2 cents guy to put my 2 cents in. So with my job with DNR, I traveled throughout the United States and we had to work with fire departments 90% of the time because that's where we either set up our command or we use them. And this district is top notch. There's some stuff out there. We had to repair their trucks at night.
Oh.
And we had to kind of do it under the thing because they just didn't have the money. And so, you know, I hear where you're coming from. I wish we would have had a station. Maybe we need to look at that too. You know, that station out there is getting older and, you know, does it meet their needs? I personally don't think so, but that's my own opinion. So, but I've seen worse out there and it's not good. And this is big big fire departments out there. They just, you know, don't know how to, I don't know, just didn't know how to fight them. And like you said, saving money, 20% by buying it, there you go. You know, so I think you guys are doing a good job and I like hearing from the public. And you're right, I've always said we do need to involve the public. And sometimes people are busy. They just don't want to come out of their house or used to being in.
I have to respond, like, what bothered me is when you said you may have to sell your house. And that's where some people feel, and where I'm coming from is people that I know are looking at their new rates and they're looking at their assessed value and they're wondering how they're going to pay the taxes. Well, you add this to it, and what then? And I'm not saying that they don't need more money. I mean, I've been at these meetings, and I know about the revolving door and the volunteers and all of that stuff. And we have really been proposing, you know, that career firefighters. I have no personal interest really in this because although I live in the district, I will probably not live in the district within the next couple of years. But I am thinking of all the people out there who, in my mind, they may not be intentionally bought something, anybody. But when you talk about rates and you talk about reduction of $1.50 to a lot, it's like crying poor. And my logic just goes little bananas there because it's a lower rate, but it's a higher $200 taxes right there. And so I think there's got to be a better way of explaining what people, taking scenarios, nobody knows the future, but what the chances are that their taxes, fire district taxes, are going to go way up after they've gone way up with the assessed value. And I every time I see this, are reduced, right now we're reduced to $1.20, it sounds like, oh my poor guys, they're getting less. But when you look at the dollars, they're getting more. And that's, I'm a proponent of direct, clear communication. And this isn't it. This isn't it in the flood. It's not fair to taxpayers to be hitting them with this poor people. Before I got involved with the fire district, I voted for the fire district levies for all my life. And then in 2011, when I saw what they were doing, it changed everything. And it's about communication, and it's about straight communication. And I don't think this really captures the picture. And I think people are going to read this and think, oh my God, we're going to be a poor district, and vote for it, even without realizing how it's going to affect. I think there's got to be a better way to present this in paper, because people don't come to meetings very often, and especially when there's a confusion in the dates. So I just think it's not, it doesn't really represent the future. And like I said, my husband passed away a couple of months ago. So I'm not gonna be in this district more than a year or two. I'm not ever, hopefully I can get out in time and not pay that $1.95. But other people are, my neighbors are. And I just, so it's not for me personally. It just doesn't represent what I see as is the dollar truth, not the rate truth, but the dollars. And I think the chief is smart enough to figure out a way to do that, other than what he put up there, to let people know that even what he put up there is a 50% increase. And this, with the set more assessed value before it hits the bump, it could be double. So
I'd like to just ask if there were any other comments or questions. I mean, I noticed that you recognized Mike as being from the public and perhaps didn't understand that the two gentlemen sitting in front of you are also from the public.
well,
If you gentlemen had any questions or comments, please. And then, yeah, we'll
I have a
begin.
question.
Um,
Does anyone know whether the percentage of working people versus retired people has changed in the last few years? Are there more retired people? Maybe people who are more likely to get sick or as they get older? Has that gotten, the rate gotten larger or smaller?
Well, we have to rely on the census that's done by the government, federal government every year. That's what gives us that information. And we've had an overall increase of population over the last decade. And our current population is something like 13,000, 14,000, something like that. We had a relatively high percentage of age value and that of retired people, but it was not the majority. The majority are still either single or dual income families. But I suspect over time that will change, and I suspect we'll have more and more older people, retired folks, and so forth. So that again is part of the discussion we had is being able and prepared to respond to their needs as well.
Well, what about the medics versus firefighters? What's the percentage?
About 75, yeah, 75 to 80% of our call volume is in our emergency medical calls. Our responders, we have all of our responders do both. They do fire and EMS both. So, but the vast majority by volume of calls that we have are emergency medical calls. Yeah.
I had a question. I don't understand the excess levy, and I thought I heard you say something about 4 years. Could you explain that to me? What happens to that over time?
It's above and beyond the statutory ceiling.
And I understand that part, but what happens to it over time? Is
The way that an excess levy works, there are various types, but to be simple, it's over a given period of time. And in our plan, we've said 4 years, but depending on what ballot measure or what we would want, that can change. But we're suggesting be a 4-year, and then the amount of that levy is set by the amount of money that we need. And then so we know that if we need, say, $100 more than we're able to collect with our base levy at $1.50, whatever. So the excess levy would be for $100 first year, for example. And then we'd look at what the amount is needed in the next year based on increased costs. So it's a fixed amount of money that's budgeted and is taxed to the taxpayer. So in essence, that's what that is.
So that expires at the end of that 4 years?
Pardon?
Yes.
That expires at the end of 4 years?
Yes, it does. It has to be renewed by a vote, yes.
And that brings me to the next question. What is the plan after 2026, or is there in the forecast if this passes and the excess levy expires?
It would be to look at probably renewal of the excess levy, because we're building a base of staffing that would be necessary, and and if we didn't continue to receive that level of funding, we'd have to make an adjustment, we'd have to lower it. And then eventually, depending on what inflation does, the base levy rate, it would probably need to be lifted at some point after 26 or 27 as well. So on into beyond 2027, 28, there would have to be board approval for further measures to continue to achieve that level of funding.
So then I think I hear you that in 4 years, we would be looking at renewing those amounts.
Basically.
Or else we would ask.
Basically, yes.
Somewhere else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chief Lemay, could you put up plan A back on the board for me? We're talking dollars, and so this makes sense to me, because I have a grasp on it, I understand. I know where that money's going, and we all, I think, are agreed from the public standpoint that we want more career firefighters. I agree with you that messaging can be a little bit better, and we have to get a better message out there, whether we are knocking on doorbells, creating flyers, whatever it takes, because this can be confusing to somebody that doesn't understand this. In this time of inflation and how much we're asking and watching our home values go up, the less that we explain these kind of numbers to the public, the harder they're going to have voting yes on these things. We've already seen it with West Thurston. We've kind of watched it with Levy and Sunwater, and we have to start, making a conscious effort to get out in the public and explaining what these numbers truly meant, because they can be confusing. To me, 28 career firefighters, helping my family, my property is a huge number. That's something I'm willing to sacrifice a lot of money for. Knowing that there's two staff stations 99% of the time, and that's money well spent in my mind. If we don't have a clear, direct message when those questions are asked, it's going to come back and bite us.
Well, that's why we're here today.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
How many plans were there?
Pardon?
Were there 4 different plans?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. Okay, because I would like to have copies of this.
There's copies over on the side table over here. You can help yourself to that.
Also, if you do computers, we have all of that information and more on our website as well.
How often are you going to do these meetings out, Chief, prior to August?
Pardon?
How often are you going to do these public information meetings prior to August and Levy?
Well, this is, at this point, we've had 2. This is the second of 2. We haven't planned a third one yet. We're going to wait and see. We're trying to get as much information. We're trying to focus people on seeing what's in the various, like social media and postings and mailings and so forth. Encouraging folks, if they do have questions, you call here, email us and that. So we don't have a third open public meeting scheduled yet, but we can, yes.
I got one more for you too as well. The 28 career staffing, does that bring our minimum staffing to 3 people on those fire engines, 81, 83?
It gets closer depending on schedules and everything. What we're focusing in is on staffing 2 fire stations. It could, on a good day, it'll be 3 at each station. On a bad one, it'll be 2. I mean, it's just the way schedules work out. But Mike suggested, for example, he would like to see more. Well, that's a minimal number to consistently staff 2 fire stations. And if we want to put 4 people on a vehicle, I mean, we're going to have more people, but it also costs more. So we need to balance that. So our current plan is to have as realistic staffing as we can at 2 locations, and we believe that we can do it certainly much better. We're doing now with 28 and 25 volunteers. Yes.
When you talk about 2 stations, I assume you're talking about this one, and then the one on the west side, the fire district.
At North Olympia, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, North Olympia one. The last that I know, there was a building purchased, it was 61st or 63rd.
63rd, right.
So you purchased that building for a residential program, I think, or whatever, I'm not sure. Do you still own that property? And
Yes.
what use are you making of that property that is sitting there?
Our long-term plan is to, when we can stabilize our staffing, only until we can stabilize our staffing at 2 locations, eventually we would move this facility, we would put the east side facility out on 63rd, so it better covers the Johnson Point and east side, and then we would probably sell this property.
So you would move to that, it's a small piece, like 5 acres.
It's large enough to develop a site out there.
So you would demolish or do something with this?
We might, I mean, that it's configured such that we could leave the house there if we built the fire station, but none of that's on the plate until we can stabilize our staffing. 10, maybe 15 years down the road. But ultimately, what we want to do is have 2 fire stations, one here to cover this side, and then one out here to cover this side.
Wow, so that would be a building, that would be cost for, I don't know how easy it would be to sell this building for whatever reasons, but then you would have to have a building cost for erecting that one station, and that's more money. It's not going into service, it's going into.
That would probably be a future source of revenue. We'd have to see whether we ask for loaded bonds or whatever. But again, we're not even contemplating establishing that new location until we've stabilized our staffing. That's going to take a while. It's going to take 2 to 3 years anyhow. But it will improve, obviously, improve the service on the east side, including your home, for example. Are there any other questions from anybody? You know, I appreciate the questions. We do want to be transparent, and we are continually working on our messaging. And like I say, even if you've got questions for me tomorrow or the next day or whatever, feel free to give me a phone call. We've got information here on how to contact me. We've got a lot of information on our website, the social media. We're pushing information out too. So again, we want to make our goal is really to have our voters make informed decisions. That's the bottom line. So.
Well, I guess I have one other question. Did you make any effort to find somebody to write a con statement? Because I called the county as soon as I got that. I called the county and said, is there an opportunity to put a con statement on that? And again, it's not that I don't want you guys to have more money or have more staff, but this is too much the way it's, and it's not clear how much it is. So that's my position. I'm not totally against more money, but they said the booklet has been printed, so there will be no con statement in the booklet. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think that there needed to be some sort of effort to get that.
There was.
It's not there, and that's misleading.
Well, we advertised in print media, we advertised over social media for both the pro and a con committee. We had one person that responded that wanted to do the pro view for the ballot pamphlet, or the election pamphlet. We did make an effort to advise the public that they had an opportunity to do that, and we had no takers.
Somehow I never get advised of anything. I never get notified of anything, and that goes back 12 years. So I don't know what that's about. But if that happens to me, it happens to other people as well. So whatever you're covering.
Well, we made a good faith effort in putting it out in the public media as best we could. We didn't knock on doors. We didn't, invite every citizen. But we made, I think, a reasonable effort to try to encourage people to do one or the other. So I'm sorry that you didn't get the word.
Is there some public media I should be on to get your messages? Do you?
Well, we advertise. I don't remember who we advertised.
Around Facebook and next door.
Well, we did it in the Olympian.
Website as well, but
We did it in the newspaper too.
yeah, we were in the newspaper.
Well, and Jolt. So I think we had it on Nextdoor. We had it on several of the social medias. Are there any other questions from folks?
We thought about putting signs in the ground.
Pardon?
Have we thought about putting signs in the ground, prop one size, QR code or?
That would be up to the pro committee. As a district, we can't do that.
Can we talk to our union about?
I have.
The district's not allowed to make any effort to push it. You can decide if they want to, but you can't ask them.
All right. Well, I want to thank folks for your attendance and your participation and engagement. I'm sorry that you didn't get the information until late. I'm glad you were able to get here. There is information, as I said, on the side table here, several pamphlets that may provide answers to some of the questions that you've got. And if not, then the chief and the website email and phone numbers are on those printed documents, so they'll be able to kind of get your answers to your questions. And with that, I'm going to close our special public meeting to discuss Proposition 1. And again, thanks for your attendance.
We're still there.